Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest experience you've had that you cannot explain? Please remember to like, share, hype, and subscribe. Got lost in the woods in down east Maine when I was a kid. Very nice compass kept taking me back to the same place over and over until it was almost dusk. In a panic, I went the opposite way that it was telling me to go in order to get home. I found a service road I'd never taken before and followed it to the highway. I swear it was like the Blair Witch Project. A few things. We were camping in a very remote water access canoe-only area, and we saw what we call a ratfish. It was half rat, half fish, swimming in the lake under the rock where we were. I'm Canadian. I know what a beaver looks like. This was no beaver. There were no dams, and it didn't come up for oxygen. It was very clear, still water, and I have a witness. We didn't have cameras, 1990s tech, and our packs were full, and we were both stone cold sober. We still can't explain what we saw. Secondly, I was walking home on my favorite path when the whole sky lit up, almost like sheet lightning. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was a beautiful night, but just wham! The sky lit up. I figure maybe a micrometeor went off, or some sort of atmospheric phenomenon I don't know about. It was awe-inspiring and a bit terrifying at the same time. I'm not psychic or religious, but I legit don't have any explanation for either situation. I have two stories. One time when I was a kid, I was playing with toys at the dining room table in my childhood home. There was a cup with ice in it on the table near where I was playing. At one point, I dropped one of the toys by accident on the table close to the cup, and when I go to pick it up, the cup just lifts by itself an inch or so off the table. It hovered, then shook. I could hear the ch-ch-ch of the ice knocking around in the cup, and then dropped back down, landing vertically like nothing ever happened. I stared at it, thinking no one would ever believe me if I said anything, when suddenly I hear my mother yell, "Did you just see that?" I looked over, and she was at the entrance to the dining room in shock. We both remember this event, and if she hadn't been there, I think I would have dismissed it as my imagination. 2. I used to have a diabetic old cat. I drew and printed an illustration of him and had it framed and hanging in my house. I teach digital art and did it as a demo and had it illustrate using a photo reference. And I liked how it came out. One morning, while getting ready for work, I went through the usual ritual of testing my cat's sugar, making sure he ate breakfast, then measure out and give insulin. After I was done and right before I left, his framed image suddenly drops off the wall onto the floor. I look at it, and the thought enters my mind, he's going to go into insulin shock today. I dismiss the thought. I'm very meticulous about how I measure and give his meds and food, so I ignore the weird thought and go to work. When I got off work, my roommate calls me to tell me my cat was in insulin shock. I rushed home to treat him, and he ended up being fine. But I was like, where did I go wrong this morning? My roommate then tells me he found vomit shortly after I had left. My cat had Bartonella that could flare up and cause him to vomit sometimes, but he hadn't in a while, so I hadn't thought of it. He had thrown up his breakfast right after I left, so he didn't absorb it enough for the insulin, I guess. He was fine, but that was so weird. Back in the 90s, I called my boss and told him I had the flu. I knew I was really sick. There was one job that had to be done that day. I said, okay, I'll come in and do it, but then I had to go home when I was done. He agreed, so I went in and did it. I was shaking so hard, leaving work I had to sit in the car for about 15 minutes before I could drive home. I barely got in bed before I passed out. Later I got up to poop. I sat down and thought, no, I'm gonna puke. I stand up, turn around, and pass out into my bathtub. My wife hears me fall, comes in, and immediately calls 911. The ambulance gets there quickly, and as I'm coming around, they haul me off to the ER, where they do all kinds of tests. I keep telling them I have the flu. 3 hours later, they finally do a flu test. Oh, you have the seasonal flu. Go home, rest, drink lots of fluids. Duh. So I did. This is where it gets weird. I was in and out of consciousness for several days. One time I remember becoming aware of being in a vast dark void. I was aware of my body but could not see it, or really feel it. It seemed like I could move, but there was absolutely nothing there. I thought, where is this? Where am I? I feel as if I hear a voice say, wait, not yet, and I wake up in bed. I really don't know if it was a fever-induced hallucination, an NDE, or what, but it scared me so bad I didn't tell my wife about it for probably 5 years. When I was 12, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw my grandmother sitting in the chair by my bed just watching me sleep. I said, "Hi, Grandma," and she smiled and waved. I rolled over and went back to sleep. Found out the next morning she had died in her sleep that same night, 3 states away. My parents got the call around 6 a.m. I've never been able to explain it, and honestly, I don't want to. It was weirdly comforting rather than scary, like she was saying goodbye. Still gives me chills thinking about it 15 years later, but in a good way. A large, loud aerial drone hovered about 200 feet above my car and followed me as I delivered newspapers at 3 a.m. This was back in 2011 when drones weren't really a thing like they are today. I didn't live near any Air Force bases or anything like that. When I was pregnant, me and my fiancé were laying in bed. My 2 oldest weren't home, it was just us. We heard a meow coming from under our bed, followed by the blanket getting tugged. We thought it was one of our cats, but when we went to look under the bed after calling said cat's name, there was no cat. No sight of any of them. I've seen and heard plenty of creepy things, but this one gave me the ick, lol. I still get chills talking about it, no idea why. The house I bought about 15 years ago has a small story to it. Apparently the prior owner's wife died in the pool. He had friends who were cops. I've never gotten straight answers from the neighbors. The master bedroom opens the pool. Every now and then I'll sense a chill and then sensation of something sitting at the end of the bed. I had a man follow me while I was trying to buy clothes for work. When I finally went up to the cash register, he followed me, got right behind me, leaned in super close and said, "Such pretty hair." Then he snorted like he was trying to suck up a fat line of cocaine, but with my hair right by my ear. I freaked out, and he bolted out of the store. The cashier asked me if I was okay, but it is still one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. Something was repeatedly but inconsistently doing a yoo whistle in the attic at 1 a.m. in the middle of a snowstorm. I was coming up the stairs when I heard it, and it felt like every hair in my body stood on end. Upon investigation, because I had heard of fogging, I didn't see anything up there, and never did find the source of the sound. Then husband heard it too, and insisted it must be the wind. I never heard anything remotely like it in any storms that followed, though. Weird dream. I was in my town at four-way stop. Everything, the world, was mirrored and in black and white. A very dark-skinned man wearing an all-gold suit, including a top hat, stepped out of the shadows. He definitely stood out to the black and white surroundings. He told me if we partnered together, we could rule anything we wanted, and I would have everything I would ever desire. His smile seemed off. I knew I should decline, so I did. He told me if I ever changed my mind to just think of him, and he would be around. I woke up in bed. The closet door was open as usual with the light on, except I saw a tall, dark, black, darker than a shadow figure, and I knew it was him. In my head I just go away, not welcome. And it went away. I will never be able to describe how it made me feel in my bedroom, like it knew that I wouldn't be the last time. I do not have a history of somnambulism. One night, I went to bed alone in my room with the door locked from the inside, and a chair pushed against it. When I woke up, my door was locked with my chair pushed against it, but my cat was curled up next to my head on my pillow. With the doors in that house, there's no way to open a door locked from the inside from the hallway, and the doors open inwards. So there's the chair, which had my school bag and several very large, heavy books on it. I guess it isn't exactly creepy, but it was really weird. The cat wasn't allowed outside, and wouldn't have been able to pull the screen off of the window. Plus, the window made a really loud needs WD-40 sound when it opened, so nobody stuffed him in my window either. So the only explanation is sleepwalking, but I've never done that before or since. Cardinals have become so symbolic around my place at Christmas time. About 15 years ago, I got the call that my grandma passed. I sat outside to contemplate the news when I saw a cardinal fly over to the tree in my backyard. The ex-wife and I are bird watchers. I never had seen a cardinal here before. My grandma used to feed cardinals specifically outside her bay window. She loved them. So it was kind of one of those, that's pretty odd moments. Fast forward a year, I get the call, my cousin committed suicide. I go outside and sure enough another cardinal comes over. I remember the last time it happened and told me then wife about the coincidence. Fast forward another year. This time it was my youngest brother who commits suicide. I go out to the front, this time just trying to breathe, when my wife calls me to the kitchen. Look babe, you see that? It's a cardinal. Of course it is. It happened one other time, except this time I saw the cardinal show up without first getting the news. I hop on social media, check in with a bunch of people. Everything's all good, phew. Then I decided to check out my old combat buddies online, and sure enough, I get, hey, I was just about to call you. Specialist so-and-so overdosed and passed away last night. God damn it. So now every Christmas, I bring out all the red bird decorations I have and continue buying in honor of all the people I've known who aren't around to celebrate with me. Just to clarify, these are the only times the ex and I have ever seen cardinals around our property. I don't know if it's like a Italian thing or maybe just a people thing. I really don't know the history of it, but my family's always been brought up to think that cardinals are representative of people who've passed away. So I've always felt that way. My mom loves cardinals too, and they do show up at pretty odd times. So has anyone else, had this phenomenon, or does anyone else feel that way about cardinals or associate that? Anyway, hi. Me and a friend walking home late at night through a residential street about 15 years ago. We were just casually chatting when we both stopped dead in our tracks and watched some kind of object hover around the roof of a house. We were both stunned, and I remember really clearly the feeling of confusion and dread. But the weirdest part of it was that we both were completely unable to actually describe what we had seen, and spent the rest of the walk home in silence. We both had the same experience of surreal fear, dread, and the feeling that we had seen something we couldn't comprehend. Even now I can recall the experience, knowing that I saw something and how it made me feel, but I can't visualize it in my memory. I'm still in contact with that friend, and we still talk about how creepy that night was, and still can't properly explain it. When I was about 8 years old, I had a babysitter who took care of us every day after school. After a few months of seeing her, her mom passed away. A few nights later, I was in my room with my sister, trying to sleep. I, for some reason, sat up in my bed and saw her mom. Me and my sister were both scared and felt like we were trapped in our room. We ran past her and ran downstairs saying, "Christina's ghost is up there." We thought the ghost was our babysitter, but I found out about a decade later that her mom looked exactly like her. I like to think it was her mom coming to check on us and seeing how we were doing. Prefaced, we have smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. My father was an ex-fireman and ensured we had them in good places and up to date. Other than that, what could I say? Our house is 115 years old and weird. There are a number of incidents in the house that involve several live-in witnesses and several guest witnesses, usually house sitters. Most of the things that happen are auditory, but there are a few that were visual and maybe one or two that got physical. For me, the creepiest one was the one where I heard a voice. Not just random mumbling or anything, but full-blown words. That day, everyone in the house had left for a music gig except me and my toddler, who was sick, hence the reason we stayed home. I was working in my office upstairs, and she was sitting on an office chair next to me. I heard someone downstairs, walking about quickly, and figured something for the gig had been forgotten and they needed to come back for it. This went on for several minutes, and then I heard a male voice yell up the stairs, "Hello?" It sounded like one of the bandmates, so I figured he had been the errand boy. But no one came upstairs, and the noise quieted for a while. I figured they just yelled to let me know what the noise was and left. Then I heard more noise downstairs start to pick up again. I was thinking, geez, this is a chaotic gig if they're back again. Then a male voice in the stairwell said my toddler's first name clearly and crisply. I shouted, "Hello?" Then it went silent again. I got up and checked down the stairs. No one was there. I sat back down and continued working. Suddenly, close by my room, I heard a male voice say my toddler's first name, middle name, and loudly and crisply. My toddler turned and looked toward the sound. By that point, I knew there was no one up there with us. I called my husband at the gig and asked if he could come home sooner. Luckily, he was out running errands and nearly finished. The band was fine, so he headed home. I saw Bigfoot when I was 17 eating from row crops in my rural area. Saw it plain as day very close by. Fast forward 20 years. My son and I were hunting. Well, he was hunting. I was just sitting in the blind enjoying the scenery. In the same area as my mom still lives there. We got out in the woods about an hour before sunrise. That was any deer we spooked walking in would be calm by the time it was actually time to hunt. We sat perfectly still and quiet, maybe 10 minutes when we heard it. The most loud, intense, bipedal footfalls you can imagine. I immediately felt the hairs on my neck and arms stand, and I just knew that it was the same creature. Knew it in my gut. I didn't say anything, as my son has always been a bit of a Gimli. He ain't scared of nothing unless it's unexplained. But my son also got spooked. Whatever it was, ran from one side of the woods to the other with minimal steps, and it was so loud. Only time that day my son raised his gun. It may not sound trippy, but I know my state's flora and fauna. I can't explain it. It was terrifying, but we came out of the woods okay. When I used to go to my grandparents' cabin, this deer would follow and stare at me sometimes. It was this one buck. I had never fed him or anything, but he would just look at me like I was some unnatural creature. It was a cabin community, so he should have been used to seeing humans, so I don't know. And I always knew it was the same buck, because he had this weird scar on his neck. I honestly wish I had gotten a pic, but the truly creepy part was when he got on the cabin's lifted porch and stared at me through the window at night for quite a bit when I was like 7. He only did it once, but gosh. Many years ago, I dated a woman who lived in another town in my general metro area. I lived on the far outskirts of the area, and there were multiple ways to get to her house from mine. The creepiest way being going down an old state highway. This road was 2 lanes at the time, with old trees and heavy foliage on both sides. Big southern trees that reached out over the road like a canopy. There were 2 old plantations on this road which were tourist destinations. One had a more memorable sign than the other, Magnolia Plantation, and was my halfway mark for going to her house. One night, I headed down this dark, quiet road heading to her house. I get to the point where I see the Magnolia Plantation sign and think, yay, halfway there. I tootle down the road another mile or so and see the Magnolia Plantation sign. Yay, halfway there. Wait, Already past that. There were no turnoffs except for driveways of private residences back in the woods. No way I could have turned myself in a circle without noticing. Fortunately, I didn't pass it again, and on the future trips down the road I only passed the sign once. So that was weird. I was backspaced without consent. I saw silent drones in 2013 at night in my rural Midwest neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning. They looked exactly like the drone videos that have come out recently with the weird lights that change color and shape, especially the red flashing lights. There were multiple drones and they were looking for something. They eventually found it, shot at it, and it exploded in the sky and then the drones flew off. I have video of them on an old phone I still have.